Presenter is the namesake of the National Wrestling Hall of Fame Dan Gable Museum. He coached with our first award recipient, and he was actually on Home and Garden Television just recently, so who would have thought he would have risen to those heights on HDTV. But Dan Gable is going to present our first award.
Thank you. We kind of got in competition after a while, so if giving him an award is still a little tough for me. But but to be honest with you, I was training for the Olympics, I believe, and Worlds, and there was this guy on the other side, the Greco-Roman side, that actually wanted to work out with me a lot. And once I worked out with him, and I wanted to work out with him a lot. He gave me something that a feel that I hadn't really felt before very often, and I was able to get better because of that. And actually, where's Jay? Where's Jay? It's right here. Okay. Obviously, it was his elusiveness, and he could duck really good. He had an unbelievable duck. And it was hard to grab. I was a hands-on guy, and when I grabbed his head, it was hard to hold. He would move this way, move that way, but it taught me unbelievable skills, because you're not really supposed to have your arms out away from your body. And it taught me that when I needed to wrestle, I needed to get my arms in and make sure that nobody could penetrate your body. And so I started wrestling from my elbows to my hands more than from my shoulders to my hands once I wrestled him, because otherwise he was going to duck you and he'd get in an unbelievable position to be able to take you down. But more than that, I think he also learned from me a little bit, just in those workouts, that duck wasn't going to beat me just alone, and that he had to keep going, So it was one of those things that we helped each other. And then the Olympics were over, and we got into at least I got into my first coaching. He might have done some in the Army or, that type of stuff, but he was something, we complemented each other, because he has things that I didn't have, and I had things that maybe he didn't have, and because of that, it worked very well. And if you look at that time in history, wrestling at the University of Iowa was about 200 people that came to the meets. And within a short period of time, and if you look at the records, all of a sudden, all the attendance records are now with the University of Iowa at home, or if they're on the roads, they're with one of the major teams, and a lot of them were with the University of Minnesota, because once he got up here, he took that program and expanded the numbers. And so, it worked very well together, and it's pretty simple. We break things down pretty simple. And it wasn't just Jay and myself, it was a lot of other good people, and a guy named Kurtelmeyer. And the thing about it, it was a little bit different style. It was more like you had to wrestle all the time. It was not in being engaged. It was forcing the action. And if somebody wasn't forcing the action, they were getting called for stalling. And it worked against us too, if our kids weren't wrestling. So the best wrestlers were in a huge meet in Iowa City, Iowa. With this official, we had 14,000 people in the old field house. 2 seconds of the first match, the referee blew the whistle and called our guy for stalling. 2 seconds, because he took a step backwards. And it created an unbelievable match for both sides. Now, people got kind of upset with that style, but if you really want to look at what's really needed in the sport more than anything, it's active engagement of the athletes performing and not standing around and just all tactics, that's so important. And that's what Jay brought to a lot of different places, every place that he's been. And because of that, you know, he came from a background of leadership, and he's continued to be a leader in his entire career. And if you look at one of the polls this year, right now, Minnesota's actually going into the season #1, even though Penn State's the reigning champion and they're probably favored by most people. But anyway, Ellen Rice, it's an award that's named after you, and I can't think of a better combination right now than for Jay Robinson being able to get the leadership award that's named after you and your former wife. And it's a big honor to be able to give this particular night and this award out. And after what Jay just went through last year with a few things in his health, he's a tough guy, because most people probably still wouldn't be here right now after what he went through. And he probably has a little bit different perspective as well, but it's something that just reinforces just how much of a leader this guy is. And with that in mind, I want to bring him up here and bring you both up here. Let's get this award. Let's start this evening out, and it couldn't start out in a better way. Thank you. Right here.
It says Leadership Award for Outstanding Contributions to the Sport of Wrestling, Jay Robinson. That's Jay period Robinson. Jay Robinson. Just a J. 2013. 2013.
If I could say go ahead, if I could just say a word as a homer from Minnesota. Not many of us here remember the paucity of winning that Minnesota did not enjoy until Jay became the coach of the University of Minnesota. I, as a student at the university, and for years afterwards, would be so glad if we had one Minnesota wrestler get to attend the national collegiates. And Jay has revolutionized our capability here. 3 NCAA national championships. And I want to express my personal gratitude, and I think I can say the same for most of us here. We really appreciate it. That's leadership.
I'll say it. The guy was pretty good in Greco-Roman, I want you to know. Fourth in the world, I believe he got that high, so that's not too bad.
It's kind of interesting getting a leadership award. Having Dan Gable, I didn't know Dan was going to be here, and we go way, way back. And I can think of a lot of funny stories. We were at the Olympic Games. Most people see Dan as a competitor, but one night after, before we were going to compete, me, Dan, and Wayne Bachman went to see Mickey King dive for a gold medal. And back then, you actually didn't have to have a ticket to get in. And we got in on the actually ground floor of where, basically, when you're at a swimming pool, we were on the deck and we were watching Mickey win her gold medal. And after it was over, we were all walking back. And we all had our Olympic warm-ups on, and we were walking back. And in Europe, autograph seeking is a huge thing. It's very, very, very huge. And so we were walking back, and they stop us. And back then, you would have to look and use your imagination, but I had very dark hair, and I had a mustache, and I was, a lot of times, thought to be Mark Spitz. And everywhere I went, people would say, Spitz, Spitz. And I'd say 9-9 spit. So we were walking back, me, Gable, and Bachman, we were walking back. There's this big, heavyset German lady, and she was looking at me, and Gable said, Spitz, Spitz. And she looks at me and she goes, 9 Spitz. 9 Spitz. And then she looks down, and as she looks down, Dan reaches in his pocket, picks out the gold medal, and puts it over my shoulder so it's hanging around my neck. Okay? She looks back up and sees the medal and goes, yeah, Spitz! So there's about 200 people got a J. Robinson Mark Spitz autograph. Because I couldn't get out there. I couldn't get out. So I've been very fortunate in my life to be around what I would call great leaders in different things. Myron Roderick taught me that you had to have a philosophy about wrestling, which was very, very important to me. And I was lucky because I came from Oklahoma State, which is very technically oriented. And Dan and I got together, and he had more of a wrestling background, and they blended very well. I was around Dan Gable as a leader, and one of the things that I always remember Dan saying is, you can always do more. You can always do more. And then another guy that really, really changed my life was when I was in the Army. There was an old cruddy guy I worked for. His name was Major Yuswa. And I only worked for the man for about 4 months, and he used to tell me this. He said, Lieutenant, if I don't teach you anything, I'm going to teach you how to think. He said, everybody goes through life and they wear blinders, and they look at the world like this. He said, I'm going to take your blinders off and help you see 90% more of what there is out there. I only worked for the guy for 4 months, but he changed the whole way that I see things. And I do. I think I see things that other people don't see, which has been a huge benefit for me in my life, right? So we talk about leadership tonight, and everybody's got a definition of it. And mine is, I think sometimes it's misunderstood from the standpoint is, I think that when you look at it, lots of people have lots of thoughts about what is leadership. There's vision, there's plans, there's caring about others, there's all kinds of things, right? The military is a great place to talk about leadership because it's different. If you look at the military, and one of the things that I believe is that awards are given from the top down. You have a tendency, if you're the boss, you get the award. But in fact, leadership really starts from the bottom up. In the military, the most basic component is what's called a fire team. But there's a fire team leader. And the next basic unit is a squad. And there's a squad leader. And the next basic unit is a platoon leader, right? The leadership is at the bottom. That's the most critical thing that you have, right? And what that means is, as a leader or in any kind of role, the higher you get, right, there is a leadership component, but there really is more of a managerial thing. You're managing people. You really lead from the bottom. If you're a coach, right, when you're an assistant coach, and most everybody in here knows that, when do you get to coach the most? You get to coach the most when? When you're an assistant coach. When you get to be a head coach, you got all kinds of different things to do, right? And so the real interaction comes from those different places, all right? So I think that it's very, very important. There are some characters that I believe constitute leadership, and these are, just explaining them here, I got about 7 of them. Having a vision and working towards it. Executing a plan, caring about others. Seeing what the needs must be done, and then just doing them, right? Putting others first, demanding a level of excellence, and sticking with it. And if you have a level of excellence, even though the people aren't right there with you, they'll buy into it if you believe it. You have to be what I call the keeper of the flame. You have to hold it when nobody else can see it. It's very difficult to do. In some ways, it's kind of lonely. My first team, right? Here's a true story. This is one of my favorite stories to tell. My first team as a young coach, I was pretty impetuous and hard-nosed, and we went and we weren't very good. We lost more dual meets as my freshman year. I mean, my first year here than I lost in high school at Iowa and Oklahoma State combined. It wasn't good. And we had a little guy that wrestled for us. His name was Ernie McNeil, and he never won. He just never won. He couldn't win. And so What happened is we were at Michigan the night before, and a couple of the guys didn't wrestle very well. And as a young, hot coach, we had practice right afterwards, and I kind of beat a couple of them up. And so the next night, we wrestled Michigan State, right? And Ernie McNeil actually won. We had a chance to win. Came down to the 190-pound match. Dave Dean was wrestling. He was ahead 5-1. With 30 seconds to go, he got reversed, put on his back, and we lost. Now, you can guess how happy I was then. We had another practice, right? Right? And it was pretty hard and difficult. And when we walked out of the place, and I can see it in my mind right now, as we walked out, there was 11 guys and me. As we walked out to go to 2 cars, I went to one, and all 11 went to the other. They had 4 in the front seat, 4 in the back seat, and 3 across like Lincoln Logs. I think Brass was there, so he can think. But the beauty is of what I'm saying about leadership is that once they see something that's important, they buy into it and they do good. The other thing is this, is that leadership, as I look around this room, and I'll just go through here, and I just wrote some real quick notes, and I said 7 things, but the beauty of it is this room is all about leadership, right? This isn't about me, right? Having a vision and working and leading people in that direction. Kyle Klingman's here. He's got a vision. He's working hard about what the Dan Gable Museum's all about. Joe Russell's sitting right there, and he has a vision of making George Madison great. That's leadership, right? Of wanting to be good. Executing a plan, right? Alan Rice has executed a plan since when? 1964. 1964, think about it. There's been someone on the Olympic team in Greco-Roman every year because he executed a plan. That's leadership, see? Leroy Smith, getting this Hall of Fame to go around the country. That's leadership. Okay? So as we go through on these different ones, caring about others, okay? The Short family, okay? Could you get 2 greater role models than Jim and Pat? Anybody? They have an unbelievable, right, example of leadership for what they do for their 4 boys, right? Caring about others, right? John Peterson, he works with us, with Athletes in Action. He cares about the kids. He comes here, right? And that's all he does. Spends time with them. You know, seeing what needs to be done and doing it. And I'm speaking about my coaches this, but Kevin LaValle, he's brought a different level to recruiting because he just sees and does it. Zach Sanders, right? We've got our little guys. He goes down and takes care of it without me having to tell him to do it. Mary Christensen, she makes sure that everything's done and keeps me straight most of the time, right? Putting other needs first, right? I would say my wife, right? Sue, is that when I was laid up in bed for a month, and anybody here really doesn't know what it was like, and it was a lot worse than you can imagine. For 12 days, basically when they cut my leg for about 82 stitches, my whole thing in the hospital was I would get it, the nurse would lift my leg out of bed, put me on the floor, I'd go to the bathroom, she'd put it on a stool, I go to the bathroom, she'd put it back, I go back to the bed, she'd put it in. For 12 days, every 4 hours, that's what I did. And when I came home, there was somebody who took care of me, right? How many of you here take care of each other? That's leadership, see? And nobody knows it, but that's what's truly important. Demanding a standard of excellence and not giving up on it. Brandon Agam, our head assistant coach, we decided we wanted to get over a 3.0 as a team. He demanded, and day in and day out. I'm not the guy that got on the kids. He was. Is that leadership? That's what leadership is, right? Luke Becker, taking and doing things in our recruiting program when I'm not there, he just sees it and does it. So those things are very important, right? Leadership, I see, as Major Yusuf said, and I tell that story because I see leadership everywhere here in this room, everywhere. I could go around and I could give 100 examples, I bet, of everybody and the things that you do, okay? We are who we are because of the uncommon leadership that goes on every day throughout our lives. Most of the time, it goes unnoticed. But it doesn't mean that it wasn't leadership and you haven't had an impact on someone's life. Each and every one of you are leading in a different way. Leadership is what we do all day in almost every area of our lives, and the benefit is the people that we touch in the process and as we move forward. Leadership is a process that goes about all the time, all around us. We need to do this sometimes, and sometimes we need to step back, take our blinders off, and see how much leadership there is in our daily lives, that people are helping and doing us and giving us different things. So I kind of took this from I borrowed this kind of from a movie. It says the general opinion starting to make out that we live in a world lacking leaders and in need of leadership. But I don't see that. It seems to me in this room that leadership is everywhere. Often it is not particularly dignified or newsworthy, but it's always there. Friendships, family, teams, companies, organizations. If you look at it, I got a sneaky feeling that you'll see that leadership is everywhere around here. Not just with me standing up here as the head of the pyramid, but everybody in this room. When I think of all the people that have been a part of my life and the impact that they have made and the guidance they have given me, I'm truly a lucky guy that I've lived my life. So I thank you for this award, and I accept it, and all the people in this room that have touched my life and helped me move people forward. Thank you very much.